The Long Way Home, Chapter 23, The Oath. Jason had insisted on giving Vi and Trondre 3 days to plan and prepare the party they wanted to throw him, and he figured that was the right call. The fire crackled merrily in the ring of stones, casting a flickering orange light across the faces of his companions as they watched the pale flames dancing within. A thick cut of meat turned on a wood spit beside the fire, under the attentive care of Vincent, who claimed to actually be decent at this kind of cooking. And from the care the man took in basting the roast in its own drippings, Jason could believe it. That, and the smell wafting over where these sat, was enchanting as the flames of fire. Jason found an easy smile at rest on his face as he stretched his hands towards the warmth to look over the other children. Vi had an anticipatory joy in her very being, right down to her fidgeting, bouncing posture, whereas Trondre had a more even excitement. Cadet wore curiosity on his peering glances at the other children, and Isis Magdalene's sanguine visage betrayed a pensive melancholy held at bay by the feeling of the moment. This was a little slice of normal, a little piece of the good life, dragged into the wild by the will of civilized people, a reminder that they were on their way home and victory. At least, that's what Jason thought about it. There had been chatter, mainly about how the fire was built, why Jason had chosen the stones he had, the methods that Vincent had employed in his cooking, and some gentle prodding by Vi and Trondre towards Isis Magdalene about how she liked her sewing machine and what she'd been working on. Chatter which fell silent as twilight faded, and the stars shone in the night sky above them, as if everyone understood that something was happening. However, Cadet broke the silence by asking, "So, how do Terrans celebrate their hatch day?" Jason sniggered a little before he answered, "Well, lots of different ways. Some people throw big parties with games and entertainment and lots of presents. Some people have a nice dinner with just a few friends and family, and all sorts of different things in between. Usually there's cake, though." "Oh," Cadet said brightly. "I guess that makes sense. Back in the greatest of cities of all other cities are less good. Other kids did a lot of different things, so Terrans are kind of like us in that way." "Terrans aren't as crazy as our general reputation would have you believe," Vincent gruffly grunted. "Solo pirate hunter," Trondre pointed out to the round of giggling at the old man's exasperated expense. "Well, back in the manatee paradise, the Terrans and I knew were all normal. None of my friends went on crazy adventures fighting pirates or finding treasures or discovering lost ruins or anything, except in games," Vi helpfully pointed out. "Not even any of the grown-ups did things like that. Well, maybe they were veterans. They'd done something." "We do have a reputation, and maybe we deserve it a little bit," Jason said pensively. "I hope we deserve a nice parts of it." "Is it not tradition amongst Terrans to give one being celebrated gifts upon the birthday?" Isis Magdalene asked quietly. "Aye, it is," Jason answered, "but traditions sometimes have to bend to reality." "As for that," Vincent said, as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a hunting knife and a worn leather sheath and a carved deer-horn scale handle, "I think, Chief, you should get a birthday present. I know that your family follows some star trail of traditions, despite being Terrans, and, as I understand things, halfway is an important birthday." Vincent gulped, took a deep breath, and extended the knife's handle towards Jason and said, "I let you borrow this a couple of times, but now I want you to have it. My friend forged the blade from an old leaf spring. My wife stitched the sheath herself, and Cal took down the buck I carved those scales from. It was Cal's knife, and now—" Jason took the knife as whatever Vincent had wanted to say caught in his throat, and he himself had to choke out, Thank you, Uncle Vincent. This is something to be responsible for." "Would that I had such a thing to give," Isis Magdalene somberly sighed. "Yet from the diligent labours of one Trondre I did make this for you, and should you permit, I shall stitch it upon your coat." Jason swallowed the lump in his throat and clutched Carl's old knife to his chest as he looked up to see the swatch of dark fabric in the girl's cupped sanguine hands, held out to him like an offering. In the flickering firelight beneath the stars, Jason could see 3 downward pale blue chevrons nested together, with a shallow arch across the legs and a top chevron, all stitched to the dark blue, nearly black swatch with white thread. "First I wished to use the yellow to more closely match Terran naval traditions, but Trondre told me that such was not appropriate." Jason reached out with trembling hands and plucked the chief's ranks insignia from her cupped hands and gently drew it close to himself, and managed against all odds to choke out a thickly, "Thank you." I didn't get you anything, Cadet blurted out, the beginnings of anger and self-reproach tingeing his voice. I thought you said you figured it out, Jason laughed, mainly to keep a grateful sob from escaping his chest as he flung an arm around the other boy and drew him into an embrace. Trondre soon found herself in Jason's startlingly strong embrace on the other side as he said, Just being with family after all that's happened is more than I could ask for. Thank you, all of you. Jason was too busy hugging his cousins to fend off his uncle's hand ruffling his hair as the old man said to him, Well, there's still a dinner to share. And cake, Vi interjected as she flung her diminutive form into Jason's middle and wrapped her short arms as far around as they could go. Dran and I made you cake. We couldn't find a good substitute for candles, though, Trondre admitted. I did consider twigs, but Vi thought that they might ruin the taste of the frosting that we managed to make. Jason relinquished his embrace on his two cousins, one from a traditional and the other adopted of his volition, and gave Vi a hug, saying, Aye, a meal and cake, then songs and stories, and whatever else that's fun that we can think of under the stars. With that, he began singing, Lost, lost, the lost boys. They lost it all. Lost, lost world and hearth and kin. Lost, lost, they heard the call. Lost, lost, the lost boys fought to win. Through it all, they weren't brought low, and now no matter where we should go, we boys who follow after all do now, those before did face a greater foe. Lost, lost, boys bore the weight of men. Lost, lost, they sought not comfort and care. Lost, lost, they wished to join the battle they'd begun. Lost, lost, despite that, they'd all seen beyond their share. Through it all, they weren't brought low, and now no matter where we should go, we boys who follow after all do know, those before did face a greater foe. Lost, lost, wounded brothers thought safe behind. Lost, lost, those who knew better did commit the sin. Lost, lost, the lost boys did as must be done, where fallen brothers were found. Lost, lost, then their wrath did begin. Through it all, they weren't brought low, and now, no matter where we should go, we boys who follow after all do know, those before did face a greater foe. Lost, lost, 'twas more than ought to be done. Lost, lost, though victory was theirs still they paid. Lost, lost, though no more had died of them, there were none. Lost, lost, until home again their youngest one made. Through it all, they weren't brought low, and now no matter where we should go, we boys who follow after all do know, those before did face a greater foe. That was hardly the end of the songs, and for the most part they leaned more towards sailing than martial. Santiago and Quebecois, of course, and Roll My Bully Boys, Roll, and of course the Cumberland's crew featured. But so too did Hearts Amongst the Stars, The Tide Shall Bring Us Together Once Again, and an old standby, I Sail, For I Am a Sailor. Then, of course, Happy Birthday, which was accompanied by a leaning cake made of layered pancakes. All in all, by the time Jason found himself in his bed, despite not being quite able to recall folding it down and making it up, he thought the party had been a roaring success, not in the least because his own spirits had been lifted beyond what he dared hope for. Vincent finished tucking in the George boy with a sigh. He thought to himself about the perils of light and joy, as a wash of old memories long suppressed of birthday parties and late-night tuck-ins and long chats by the wood burner while winter howled outside. No hooch to chase the memories away, and despite the sorrow they brought, he wasn't sure he'd want to anyway. Somehow, the old memories and the pining for what could have been, what was taken away, mingled with the pleasure and joy of the day to make what was new all the more poignant. Sometimes there was enough light to see by, after all, and sometimes pain isn't the worst thing in the world. Before slumber dragged Vincent into dreams troubled by grief and joy both, he said a prayer for the children in his care, or at least he mumbled something prayer-like. Chief in his thoughts were to keep the George boy's childhood intact by some divine miracle despite all the poor kid had seen and done. Not far behind was to keep the whole lot of them safe, and after that was to keep the ship that the kids loved from harm. After all that, he wondered if God could spare a little help for himself, mainly to not let Cadet down. Vincent awoke early in the morning, by his ship's clock anyway. By the alien planet sun, it was late in the morning, nearly noon. What passed for noon on such a planet anyway? It didn't matter much to him. What mattered to Vincent was dragging himself through his hygiene routine to get to the prize of coffee in the galley, where no doubt the kids were already up and active. Children, as he knew well, had little to no regard for simple pleasure of sleeping late. Then again, the boys didn't exactly have their own room to laze about in. Whatever the reason, Vincent was grateful to have the tables to sit at. and a mug of steaming black coffee waiting for him as he took his seat. While the kids didn't exactly give him peace and quiet, meaning they discussed their opinions on various media as if he wasn't there, none of them interfered with the coffee's work in bringing Vincent around to full awakeness. Then again, Vincent couldn't follow what in the name of goodness they were talking about even then. He found himself complaining in his own head about kids these days, and rebuked himself as sounding like an old man, which he retorted to himself that he was an old man, and that moment he decided that holding a silent argument with his own mind wouldn't be a fruitful use of his time. "This place seems pretty sparse," Vincent began abruptly, "but I think we'd better try find any supplies while we can. I'd like to try for another 2-week trip through the hyper." "All right," the George boy said. "You got a plan?" "Yeah. I'll take Cadet and Tran out towards the wood. You can go along the river with Vi and Isis Magdalene along the river. And we meet up again by sunset. Maybe we wait for the sun to come up and try again." "Sounds good to me," Jason said. So one's gearing up later, and Vincent crossed the open green with Trandre following closely behind, and Cadet soaring in wide looping circles above. His companions didn't mind the quiet and were too far away to talk, respectively. So Vincent put some effort into listening for strange or unusual sounds. Wind across the turf, the squeezing buzz of something like an insect, nothing much in the way of potential prey. Still, when they stepped below the twisting and wind-swept branches of the woods, and Cadet was forced to take short, gliding flights between branches overhead, he could hear nothing besides the wind in the branches and the calls of creatures too small for the crew to consider game. The hours went by, and the sun began to dip low in the alien sky. Life was good. The broad, placid river gently lapped at the banks as Jason walked along it and scanned the rolling horizon below. Vi was alternately below and skimming the surface of the water, collecting a native freshwater mollusk while occasionally bemoaning the lack of any vertebrate fish swimming in that particular river. Mrs. Magdalene had insisted on carrying the collected shellfish in a tote that she'd found aboard the long way, and had the good sense to wear a dress that looked to be made of some kind of durable fabric. Jason figured the baby steps towards sense were good enough, seeing as how trousers would have made more sense on account of how she still had to daintily pick her way across the pebbly riverbank to keep from tripping. Leaving aristocrats and how they made even less sense than regular girls aside for the moment, Jason adjusted the strap of his RNI surplus shotgun on his shoulder and checked the sky. A half moment of thought later, and Jason nodded to himself and called to Vi when she surfaced for breath. "Hey, come here for a second." He waited there, feeling Isis Magdalene's eyes on him. He didn't much like that. He tried to put that feeling aside, as he told Vi, "Let's just see what's around this next bend, then start heading back. It's getting late." "Okay, Chief," the young girl agreed cheerily, before twisting in a somersaulting dive to rocket off just beneath the water's surface. "You carry this well," Isis Magdalene said seriously. "I don't know what you mean," Jason said as he strode along the stream. "I mean, she has an expectation of you, such an expectation I am being trained to carry." At that, Jason looked over his shoulder to raise a skeptical eyebrow at Isis Magdalene that she met by saying, "I do not mean that you are like our people's nobility, as you might see them. I speak only of how she expects you to decide things, and decide them well. You carried this weight well." "I do my best," Jason muttered, and tried to shrug the compliment away. The pebbles ground against each other's underfoot as silence fell between the pair until she said, "You dislike my words." Jason shifted the weight of the shotgun on his strap again before he said, "I'm not very good with, compliments. Why not?" "Don't know. They just make me feel weird," Jason said before mentally kicking himself. "Sorry if I came off as rude." "I took no offense," the girl reassured him. "And if you're also take no offense, I would ask a question of you." "Shoot," Jason said absently as he peered ahead at the opposite riverbank and the sweeping bend to the left ahead. There was something odd about how the turf was lumpy. "You do not do as I was instructed. You do not remain aloof. You do not order things done to show that you know how to give good commands, yet you have thus trust. How is this?" "That's one way to get respect. Another is to be there, to ask questions, to help out, to recognize where folks are better than I am. I don't want to be apart and above my friends." Isis Magdalene seemed to think that over for a while before she said, "I see. Your people do not expect you to be remote, so you may be with them. I envy this." "Well, you're with my people for the moment," Jason told her as he started to suspect something. "No need to try and hold yourself above. I guess a lot of regular folks would see this as an insulting condescension in your circles." "Indeed," she told him. "It is refreshing to speak so frankly with one not nobly born." "The sea is so wide, you can never behold all that's in it," Jason muttered before he realized what he had suspected, and concluded that he was correct. Those green lumps in the side of the hill were structures of some kind, and a flash of furtive movement told him that whatever built them hid within. "Bye!" he called out loudly, as he could manage, and when her head broke the surface, he snapped, "Back to the ship, now!" Jason spun on his heels and began to trot back upstream, and noted that Vi had wasted no time in utilizing her powerful rudder tail to zip ahead of him towards the long way, leaving a splashing wake trailing behind her. "What have you seen?" Isis Magdalene said as she did her level best to keep up with Jason. "Structures," Jason said. "Maybe it's instinctual animal building, or maybe it's people. Either way, they're hidden their structures when they noticed us. Not a good sign. I saw at least 2 dozen before we got around the bend. And if they're all grouped together like that, it's just a danger I'd rather not expose ourselves to." "You are mighty in wisdom indeed," the girl panted as she stumbled over the hem of her dress, and muscles clattered from the bag to the pebbles below. Then Jason's heart sank into his belly as he saw the telltale streaks of multiple landing craft burn their lines across the sky. "Sorry about this," Jason said as Cal's old hunting knife leapt into his hand, and he seized a handful of her dress to cut the long slit in it. "But this dress is in the way. We need to run." "My dress," the girl cried in distress as Jason sheathed the knife again, to take her by the hand as she gasped, "Run! I've not the—" Jason half pulled and half dragged her along the riverbank as he took the long, loping strides of a heavy wielder on a light wield. "Focus!" he said between strides. "On! Breathing! I won't let you fall." They ran. They ran as the burning streaks in the entry faded in the sky. They ran as Jason started to draw some conclusions in his mind. They ran as the high-pitched whine of landing craft engines filled the air. And they ran as growing black specks came into view. Despite all their efforts, they hadn't made it back to the long way. Jason let out a string of disjointed curses in every language he knew as he veered away from the river and redoubled his efforts to sprinting run towards the collection of low purple-leafed bushes. Vincent arrived at the long way to find Vi standing at the loading ramp and casting worried glances towards the river. "Where's Jason and Isis Magdalene?" he asked through his laboured panting and let Trundre slide from his back. Vi slapped the dirt with her still damp tail nervously and said, "He told me to get back to the ship, so I did. I think they're on their way here, but they have to run." "Get out!" Vincent called to skyward. "Get inside and get the long way ready for takeoff." The boy took a looping dive that ended in a run directly up the landing ramp ahead of Vincent, who went directly to his armory. "What are we going to do?" Trundre asked through a shaky voice. Vincent said as he shoved a carbine into her arms and started grabbing pistols, his tomahawk, and even a couple grenades for his own use. "And guard the long way," he continued, "while I go out and get them." Tears ran down Isis Magdalene's sanguine cheeks from her tightly pressed eyes as she cowered beneath the slender branches of the low patch of shrubs. Her breath came in shallow, panicked shudders, and she couldn't make herself be quiet. Jason crouched on his haunches and peered through the violet leaves with cold, angry eyes at the shambling grub hosts making their way to their hiding place. "They shall take me again! They shall take me again! They shall take me again!" Isis Magdalene began to whisper as she shivered and shuddered beside him. With a surety that came from simple honesty, Jason told her, "No, they won't. I already promised." Seeing no other choice, Jason rose and took aim. End of chapter. I'd quickly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Casper Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.